A man can trade his soul for $3. Cole learned this on a Tuesday, under a sky the color of a fresh bruise, the wind carrying the smell of dust and decay across the plains. His ranch was a skeleton, its ribs picked clean by drought and debt. The cattle were thin, their hides stretched tight over bone, and the fences sagged like tired old men. His wife, Sarah, was gone, swallowed by the same dry earth that refused to give him a living, leaving behind a silence in the house that was louder than any storm. All that remained were his 2 children, Leo and Maya, their faces smudged with the grime of a life that was wearing away at the edges. Desperation was a physical weight, a stone in his gut, and it had driven him to a place he never thought he'd go, a fly-blown, clandestine market in a dry riverbed miles from any honest town. It was a place for whispers and shadows, where men with dead eyes traded things that had no price. He was there for cheap generator parts, maybe a line on some work, anything to keep the lights on for another week. He saw her then, huddled between 2 rust-pocked trucks. A woman, her face a mask of weary resignation, her black hair matted with dust. The men around her were laughing, their teeth yellow in the fading light. They were pawning her off, a piece of unclaimed cargo. They said she was Chinese, that she spoke no English, that she was worth less than the scrap metal they were hauling. Cole was half drunk on cheap whiskey and despair, a dangerous combination. The laughter grated on him, a reflection of his own failure. In a moment of profound self-loathing, a gesture of pure, nihilistic spite aimed at himself and the world that had broken him, he did it. He pulled 3 crumpled dollar bills from his pocket, the last of his cash. "I'll take her," he slurred, the words tasting like ash. The men stopped laughing. They looked at him, then at the woman, then at the pathetic offering in his hand. One of them, a man with a tattoo of a snake coiled around his throat, snatched the bills. It was an insult, a joke, but money was money. He shoved the woman toward Cole. "She's your problem now, rancher." The drive back was a long, suffocating silence. The woman sat perfectly still in his passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the endless stretch of cracked asphalt ahead. She was a ghost, a tangible manifestation of his rock bottom. He could feel the accusation in her stillness. He had not saved her, he had simply changed her cage. He pulled up to the small, weathered ranch house where a single yellow light burned in the window. Leo and Maya were asleep. He got out, the truck's engine ticking in the quiet night. He opened her door. She didn't move. He gestured vaguely toward the barn. "You can sleep there." "There are blankets." He couldn't look at her. The shame was a hot poker in his chest. He turned his back on her, on the whole sorry affair, ready to walk into his house and drown the memory of the day. A voice, clear and low, cut through the chirping of the crickets. It was not the voice of a broken, helpless thing. It was steady, measured, and it spoke his name. Cole. He froze, his hand on the doorknob. The world tilted on its axis. He turned slowly, the dust swirling around his boots. The woman was standing by the truck, her face unreadable in the dim porch light, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that stripped him bare. She knew him. The weight in his gut shifted from desperation to pure, cold fear. He stared at her, this stranger he'd bought for $3, and understood that he hadn't brought home a victim. He had brought home a reckoning. The night offered no answers, only the whisper of the wind through the dry grass and the unnerving stillness of the woman who now watched him from the shadows of the barn. Cole barricaded the house door with a chair, a futile gesture that did little to calm the frantic beating of his heart. He sat at his kitchen table, a shotgun resting across his lap, watching the barn until the bruised sky began to lighten into a sickly gray dawn. When the sun rose, he went out to face her. She was sitting on a hay bale, her back straight, as if she had been waiting. She had found a water pump and washed her face, and in the clean morning light, he could see the hard lines of her existence etched around her eyes and mouth. She was a survivor, that much was clear. "How do you know my name?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. She didn't answer. She simply watched him, her gaze analytical, as if she were measuring him, weighing his worth. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The screen door creaked open. Maya, his 5-year-old daughter, stood on the porch, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, her small hand clutching a stuffed bear with one button eye. She saw the woman and tilted her head. Cole's body went rigid. Maya, get back inside, but the girl took a hesitant step forward, her curiosity overriding her caution. The woman's expression softened, a barely perceptible shift. She held out a hand, palm up. A peace offering. Maya looked from the woman to her father, then took another step. Leo, older and more cautious at 10, appeared behind his sister, his face a mask of suspicion. "Dad? Who is that?" Cole couldn't answer. He didn't know. The woman, this enigma, slowly lowered her hand. Over the next few days, an uneasy truce settled over the ranch. Cole tried to ignore her, a task made impossible by her quiet, pervasive presence. He named her Lynn in his head, a simple, anonymous sound for an unknowable person. She did not speak again, but her actions were louder than any words. She moved with an economy of motion, a purpose that was both unsettling and impressive. She found the split in the chicken coop fence and mended it with wire she'd scavenged from a junk pile. She noticed the slight limp in their old horse's gait and made a poultice of weeds that seemed to ease the animal's pain. She showed Leo how to make a figure-4 deadfall trap, her hands moving with a fluid, practiced grace. Leo, initially hostile, found himself watching her, intrigued by her silent competence. Maya adored her. Lynn would sit with the girl for hours, weaving complex figures out of twine or carving tiny animals from scraps of wood with a small, sharp knife Cole was sure she'd had hidden on her person. He watched them from a distance, a knot of conflict tightening inside him. He had brought this danger into their lives, yet she showed his children more gentle attention than he had in months. His grief for Sarah was a wall he had built around himself, and he had forgotten how to reach through it. One afternoon, a sleek black truck kicked up a plume of dust as it sped down their long driveway. Cole's blood ran cold. It was Silas. He was a vulture in a tailored shirt, all smooth charm and predatory smiles. He was the man who held the deed to Cole's failure, the source of the debt that was choking him. "Get inside. Both of you," Cole hissed at the children. He met Silas on the porch. "Cole, my friend," Silas said, his voice like honey laced with poison. "Just checking in. Times are tough. I worry about you. And your lovely children." His eye scanned the property, lingering on the house. "You look tired. Working hard. What do you want, Silas?" "Just what's mine. The payments are late. You know my policy on late payments." He smiled, a flash of white teeth. "I'm a patient man. But my patience has limits. 1 week, Cole. Get me something. Or I'll start taking things of sentimental value." Silas didn't see Lynn. She had vanished the moment the truck appeared, melting into the shadows of the barn like a wraith. After Silas left, the dust settling back onto the scorched earth, Cole slumped against the porch railing, the man's threats echoing in the oppressive heat. He felt a presence beside him. It was Lynn. She was looking down the road where the black truck had disappeared, her jaw set, a flicker of something ancient and cold in her eyes. Then she looked at him, and for the second time, she spoke. Her voice was a low murmur, a confirmation of his worst fears. "Silas," it wasn't a question. It was a statement. A recognition. And in that single word, Cole understood that the storm he had been running from had finally found him, and this strange, silent woman was standing directly in its eye. He grabbed her arm, his grip hard, desperate. "Talk to me. Now. Who are you?" He pulled her toward the barn, away from the house, away from the innocent ears of his children. The air inside was thick with the smell of hay and animal sweat. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight piercing the gloom. He spun her around, his face inches from hers. "You know him. You know my name." "No more games." Lynn didn't flinch. She met his furious gaze with an unnerving calm. For a long moment, she said nothing, her silence a weapon she wielded with expert precision. Then, she slowly, deliberately, pulled up the sleeve of her tattered shirt. On the pale skin of her forearm was a scar. It was not a random mark from a life of hardship, it was a brand, a stylized sigil of a serpent eating its own tail. Cole felt the air leave his lungs. His grip on her arm went slack. He stumbled back, his mind reeling, the past rising up to drown him. He knew that mark. He had worn it himself, a lifetime ago, a faint, silvery ghost of a tattoo on his own shoulder that he kept hidden under his shirt. It was Silas's mark. The symbol of the syndicate they had both served, a brutal network of smugglers and enforcers he had run away from when he met Sarah, desperate to build a clean life on the bones of a rotten one. He had thought that part of him was dead and buried. "You worked for him," Cole breathed, the words a hollow whisper. Lynn shook her head, a sharp, definitive motion. She pulled down the collar of her shirt, revealing another scar near her collarbone, a puckered, ugly thing. A bullet wound. "I didn't work for him," she said, her voice laced with steel. "He worked for me." The confession hung in the air, rearranging the entire world as Cole knew it. The woman he'd bought in a drunken stupor wasn't a victim. She wasn't just an associate of his old life. She had been at the center of it. She explained in clipped, sparse sentences, painting a picture of betrayal and revenge. Her name wasn't Lynn, that was a name for ghosts. Her real name died with her family, a casualty of Silas's ambition. She and Silas had built the organization together. He was the face, the charismatic talker. She was the strategist, the blade in the dark. He had grown greedy, paranoid. He orchestrated a coup, framing her for a deal gone wrong, turning their own people against her. He shot her and left her for dead in a burning warehouse. But she survived. She had spent years in the shadows, healing, gathering information, hunting him. The men at the market weren't his, they were from a rival crew who had caught her by chance, ignorant of her true identity. Finding Cole, she admitted, was a coincidence, but one she was now prepared to use. He wasn't just a debtor to Silas, he was a loose end, a man who knew too much about Silas's beginnings. "He won't stop with the money," she said, her eyes boring into his. "When he's done with you, he will erase you. Your children." The truth of her words settled on him, cold and heavy as a tombstone. His debt wasn't just financial. It was a blood oath from a past life, and Silas was coming to collect the final payment. The power dynamic in the dusty barn had irrevocably shifted. Cole was no longer the reluctant protector of a mysterious stranger. He was her subordinate, her asset, a pawn in a war he thought he had escaped. He looked at her, at the quiet lethality in her posture, the calculated resolve in her eyes. He hadn't bought a woman for $3. He had bought a ghost, and she had brought her war to his doorstep. His only chance of survival, the only way to protect Leo and Maya, was to help her win it. The ranch became a silent training ground. The days leading up to Silas's deadline were thick with a tension that was almost palpable. There was no more pretense. Cole and the woman, he still thought of her as Lynn, a name for this new, grim reality, worked as a unit, a pact sealed by shared history and a common enemy. She moved through his property with the eye of a guerrilla fighter, pointing out vulnerabilities he had never seen. The long, exposed driveway. The clear line of sight to the house from the ridge. The way the barn doors could be forced. She spoke little, communicating instead through gestures and sharp, direct commands. "The windows are a kill zone. Board the lower ones. Leave a firing slit. This patch of ground is too soft. A mine here." He didn't have mines. She showed him how to build a pressure plate trigger attached to a bundle of fuel-soaked rags and a battery. It was crude, but it would work. He followed her instructions, his hands raw, his muscles aching. He was a rancher, used to the hard labor of the land, but this was different. This was the work of deconstruction, of turning his home into a fortress, a tomb. He was unearthing a version of himself he had tried to bury, a man familiar with the cold logic of violence. He saw the same transformation in her. The quiet, watchful refugee was gone. In her place was a commander. She moved with a predator's grace, her senses on a knife's edge. She taught him how to move without sound, how to use shadow and cover, how to reload his father's old rifle with a speed and efficiency that was terrifying. During the day, they worked. At night, they sat in the dim light of the kitchen, cleaning weapons, the silence broken only by the rhythmic scrape of a whetstone on steel as she sharpened her small knife. Leo and Maya watched them, their young faces etched with a fear they did not understand. Cole tried to shield them, telling them they were preparing for a big storm, a lie that felt thin and hollow even to his own ears. He took them down to the old storm cellar, a cramped, musty space dug into the earth beneath the house. He stocked it with water, blankets, and a battery-powered lantern. "If you hear loud noises," he told Leo, his voice tight, "you bring Maya down here and you lock this door. You don't open it. For anyone but me. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide and serious, the weight of the world suddenly on his 10-year-old shoulders. Maya just clutched her bear, her thumb in her mouth. The day arrived under a malevolent, sunless sky. The air was still and heavy, pregnant with violence. Lynn stood on the porch, sniffing the air like a wolf. "They're coming," she said. It wasn't a guess. It was a certainty. Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. He gathered his children, hugged them with a ferocity that scared them, and led them to the cellar. He looked into Leo's eyes. "I love you. You be brave for your sister." He closed the heavy wooden door, the sound of the bolt sliding home echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. When he emerged, Lynn was gone from the porch. He found her in the barn, perched in the hayloft like a bird of prey, a rifle resting on a bale of hay, aimed at the driveway. 2 more vehicles were coming, flanking Silas's black truck. 3 in total. More men than they had prepared for. Cole took up his position by the boarded-up living room window, his own rifle unsteady in his sweaty hands. He could see them now, 3 dark shapes kicking up dust, rolling inexorably toward his home, toward his children. The lead truck, not Silas's, hit the trigger point. The ground erupted in a ball of greasy, orange flame. The explosion was shockingly loud, a brutal roar that tore through the quiet afternoon. The truck swerved violently and crashed into a fence post. Men started piling out of the other 2 vehicles, shouting, taking cover, firing wildly at the house. The siege had begun. Bullets splintered the wooden siding of the house. A window shattered upstairs. Cole returned fire, the rifle bucking against his shoulder, the smell of cordite filling the air. He was clumsy, his shots hurried, but he was a target, drawing their attention. From the barn, Lynn was methodical. Precise. Each shot from her rifle was followed by a cry of pain from outside. She was a ghost, an unseen force of death picking them off one by one. The fight devolved into a chaotic, brutal series of skirmishes. One of Silas's men made it to the house, kicking in the back door. Cole met him in the kitchen, a wild, desperate struggle of swinging fists and grunted curses. He brought a cast-iron skillet down on the man's head, the sound a sickening crunch. He stood over the body, breathing hard, his knuckles bloody, the quiet rancher fully consumed by the cornered animal fighting for its young. He saw another man trying to flank the barn. "Lynn! Your left," he yelled, his voice raw. The shot from the hayloft came a second later. The man crumpled. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of noise and fear. Then, an eerie silence fell. The shooting stopped. Cole peered through his firing slit. 2 men were down in the yard. The burning truck hissed and popped. Silas's truck was still there, but he was nowhere to be seen. He had used his men as a diversion. A floorboard creaked above him. Cole's blood turned to ice. Silas was already inside. He had come in through the broken upstairs window while the chaos raged outside. Cole moved silently through the house, shotgun now in hand. He heard a voice, Silas's voice, coming from Maya's room, calm and conversational. It was a taunt. Cole burst into the room. Silas was standing by the small wooden bed, trailing a hand over the patchwork quilt Sarah had made. He smiled his wolf smile. "Family man, Cole. Who would have thought? After all we did." All we were, "Get out of my house." "This was never your house," Silas said softly. "It was just a place you were hiding." "From me." "From yourself." Behind him, a shadow detached itself from the doorway. It was Lynn. Her face was grim, a long scratch bleeding on her cheek. She held her knife, its blade catching the dim light. Silas chuckled. "And look who it is. The ghost. I should have known you were too stubborn to die. Came to finish what I started." "I came to reclaim what you stole," Lynn said, her voice dangerously low. The final confrontation was not a prolonged battle. It was a sudden, vicious explosion. Silas lunged, not at Lynn, but at Cole, a knife appearing in his hand as if by magic. He was faster than Cole remembered. The two men crashed against the wall, grunting with effort. Silas was stronger, fueled by a cold rage. He pushed his blade closer to Cole's throat. "She made you weak, Cole. Your wife. This life." Out of the corner of his eye, Cole saw Lynn move, a blur of motion. She didn't attack Silas from behind. She kicked a small wooden chest on the floor, sending it sliding into the back of Silas's knees. He buckled for a split second, his balance compromised. It was all the opening Cole needed. He twisted, using Silas's own momentum against him, and drove his weight downward. They fell to the floor, Silas's knife skittering away. Cole's hands found Silas's throat, squeezing, all his grief and rage and fear channeled into that one desperate act. Silas's eyes bulged. He clawed at Cole's arms. And then Lynn was there. She stood over them, her expression unreadable. She did not help. She simply watched, her presence a silent judgment. Cole felt Silas's struggles weaken. He saw the life drain from the man's eyes, the predatory smile replaced by a final, surprised grimace. He had done it. He had killed the monster from his past. He released his grip and scrambled back, gasping for air, the reality of his actions washing over him. He had protected his family. He had taken a life. The two truths warred within him. Lynn knelt and picked up Silas's knife, wiping the blade clean on her pants before tucking it away. The fight was over. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the yard. The silence that returned was different now, heavier, final. It was the silence of survival. In the aftermath, the world was muted, seen through a haze of exhaustion and adrenaline. Cole walked through his ravaged home, the smell of gunpowder and blood thick in his nostrils. He slowly unbolted the cellar door. Two small faces stared up at him, pale with terror. Maya ran to him, burying her face in his leg, her small body trembling. Leo stood his ground, his eyes taking in his father's bruised face and bloody hands. "Is the storm over?" he asked, his voice a small, shaky thing. "Yes," Cole said, his own voice cracking. "The storm is over." He led them out into the twilight. The ranch was a wreck, littered with the debris of the fight. But the house was still standing. They were still standing. He saw Lynn by the barn, methodically cleaning her rifle. She worked with a detached focus, as if this were just another day, another job. Her war was won. Her ghost could finally rest. Cole knew she would leave. Her purpose here was fulfilled. There was nothing left for her but the open road and the shadows she called home. He built a fire in the yard, a small point of warmth against the encroaching dark. He cooked what little food they had left. He watched his children, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, and felt a profound, aching love for them. They were all he had. They were everything. Later, as the stars emerged in the vast, indifferent sky, he saw her approach, a small, packed bag slung over her shoulder. She was leaving. He didn't have the words to ask her to stay. He had no right. What could he offer her but a broken-down ranch and a life haunted by what they had done? He simply looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze shifting from him to the children, who had fallen asleep wrapped in a blanket by the fire. A long moment passed. She was a woman of few words, and he expected none now. He expected her to turn and walk away, to disappear as mysteriously as she had arrived. But she didn't. She unslung the bag from her shoulder and let it drop to the dust with a soft thud. She looked back at him, her expression holding a trace of something he had never seen there before, not victory, not peace, but a kind of weary acceptance. A quiet decision. Cole felt a flicker of something fragile and unfamiliar in his chest. It might have been hope. He gave her a small, tired nod, the only acknowledgement he could manage. She nodded back. The exchange was all that was needed. The past was a field of ashes behind them. The future was an unknown, unforgiving landscape stretching out in every direction. But tonight, under the silent watch of the stars, they were not alone. 3 survivors and 2 sleeping children, a strange, shattered family, sharing the warmth of a small fire against the immense darkness.